Here, our goal is to determine the size of angle P. Notice here that we can form a C shape. We can form a C shape. Now, what does a C shape help us to identify? Well, it says here that we can often spot co-interior angles by drawing a C shape. So a C shape can help us to identify co-interior angles. So that means that this angle P and this angle whose size is 58 degrees, these two angles are co-interior angles. Now, what do we know about co-interior angles? Well, co-interior angles, if we notice here, we have the C shape here, and we know that angle G and angle H are co-interior angles. But what do we know about them? G plus H is equal to 180 degrees, which means that co-interior angles must add up to 180 degrees. And since P and this angle whose measure or whose size is 58 degrees, since these two angles are co-interior angles, that means that they must add up to 180 degrees. And so in order to determine the size of angle P, we're going to subtract. We're going to say P is equal to 180 degrees minus 58 degrees. And so that means that P is going to be equal to 122 degrees. And so that means that P is equal to 122 degrees because co-interior angles add up to 180 degrees. So P is equal to 122. Next, our goal is to determine the size of angle Q. Notice that angle Q is right here. And notice that if we look carefully at this useful geometrical rule, it tells us that vertically opposite angles are equal. And notice that this angle right here, whose measurement is 58 degrees, is vertically opposite to this angle. So these two angles right here are vertically opposite. So that means that if this is 58 degrees, then this right here must be equal to 58 degrees because vertically opposite angles are equal. So these two are equal. So if this is 58, it's also 58 because they are vertically opposite. Next, in order to determine the size of angle Q, what we're gonna do is we're gonna remember, or we're gonna note and observe this geometrical rule. And this geometrical rule tells us that angles on a straight line at a common point add up to 180 degrees. Notice that we have a straight line and we have a common point and we have three angles on this straight line, right? Three angles. We have 42, 58, and Q. Now, these three together, if we add them all together, they must add up to 180 degrees because they're on a straight line at a common point. And so if we want to determine the size of angle Q, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, Q is going to be equal to 180 degrees minus 58 plus 42. And so we're going to add 58 plus 42 first, and we get what? We get 100 degrees. And so Q is going to be equal to 180 minus 100. And what is 180 minus 100? That's definitely 80. So Q is going to be equal to 80 degrees. And so that's the size of angle Q. Angle Q is 80 degrees. Next, we want to determine the size of angle R. Notice that we can often spot interior alternate angles by drawing a Z shape. So a Z shape helps us to identify alternate angles. Indeed, we know from the previous question that Q is equal to 80 degrees. But our goal is to determine the size of angle R. So how are we going to determine the size of angle R? Well, we know that we have a Z shape, and we know that Z shape helps us to identify alternate angles. And we know that angle R and angle Q, which measures 80 degrees, are alternate angles. And the Z shape helps us to identify the alternate angles. So these two angles are alternate angles. What do we know about alternate angles? Well, alternate angles are equal in measure because here, this angle and this angle are alternate. And so, and because of that, they have the same letter. They have the same measurement. Angle A and angle A, they measure the same thing. That's why this is angle B and this is angle B, because they have the same size. And so alternate interior angles or alternate angles are equal in measure. And so that means that since we know that angle Q and angle R are alternate angles, that means that they are equal in measure, equal in size. And so since Q is equal to 80 degrees, we know that R is also going to be equal to 80 degrees. And so that means that the size of angle R is 80 degrees.